Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our community session. As you know, we are having this session every month, a little bit after we release our release note. Today, I have Anuj with me. Anuj, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. How's it going, everybody? My name is Anuj Singh. I'm a solutions engineer here at Port. Some background on me. Before joining Port, I was at HashiCorp for a little bit in the cloud automation sector. And then I was in the hybrid cloud sector at IBM for a bit. And super excited to be here. Hopefully you guys gain something from this community session that Jenny and I put together. Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah. And I'm Jenny. I'm leading product marketing here at Port. And let's get started. So for today, the agenda, we will have a quick run through our major releases for the month. We will go through the new features, and Anuj will demo some of them. And we will also give you a sneak peek into the next release. So this release was packed. We had many major items. We released quite a lot. I think that the biggest feature or capability that we released is automation. It really unlocked a lot of capabilities, and we're going to talk about it. We've also released flexible scorecards. We now have engineering insights in Port. We also have the ability to test data mapping. We've added a feature that was quite required and requested, being able to control the payload. We've done quite a lot of enhancement on our infrastructure as code framework. And we are also having new integrations, Ocean integrations with Datadog, AWS, and GCP. We had exporters, but today they are supported with Ocean. So let's get started. Automation is out. It's a major feature that I think many of you were waiting for it. By the way, you can ask questions. We are monitoring the chat. So if you have questions, you can ask a question on the chat and we will answer to them. So yes, automation is out. Super excited to present it to you. Automation unlock a lot of new use cases. So what can you do with automation? You can start automating repetitive tasks. So, all your cleanups, terminating a developer environment with a TTL, revoking just-in-time permissions. You can do it now with automation. You can also use automation to manage alerts and notifications. So you can set up an automation to nudge a developer to review a PR after, 2 days have passed. Or you can set up an automation to send a notification to a managers if your SLOs aren't met. You can send alerts to security for critical alerts for your tier 1 assets. So really you can start using automation for setting up your notifications and alerts. And maybe another one that is quite interesting is that you can use automation to enforce policies. So many times, our policies are in some dusty wiki, in some Confluence page, but now you can really embed your policies into the developer's workflow. So for example, I'll give you an example. You want to allow access to production only when you're on call or only when an engineer is on call, and then revoke the permission when the shift ends. You can do it with automations. Another use case that one of our customers did, they wanted to limit the number of dev environment that a developer can spin up in a month. So they decided to, if a developer requests to spin up more than 2 dev environment in a month, it should go through a manager approval. And they set up an automation for it. So really, the use cases are endless. We've also written a blog about it with many examples and use cases, and we have a lot of documentation on how to implement some of them. But really, the idea of automation is to streamline your processes. You can now really do end-to-end process orchestration for incident management, PR reviews, vulnerability remediation. I saw yesterday something amazing that a customer did where they are creating an automation to open an incident automatically when there is a critical alert. And it automatically adds all the service owner on call. It adds all the dependencies and a lot of information from the catalog. So you can, like, it's really endless what you're able to do with automations. And over to you now, Anuj.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Jenny, for that. I wanted to, before I jump into a demo, kind of go through some practical examples of automation like that you would find in your business or in a company or when you're using it. So the first example I want to go through here is the way I like to think about automations is there's a trigger point and then there's an action that has to happen from that trigger. So in this case, we've got CPU usage is over 70%. This could be a stipulation that you have within a company that says, you know, for my cluster or for my server, if my CPU goes over 70%, I need to upscale that cluster. So in this case, that would trigger a automation to upscale that cluster. Another example is a secrets rotation, right? You know, if I have a TTL for a secret and that TTL has expired, I want to go to my secrets management service and rotate that secret. So that trigger point would be that time to live. And then that action would be, okay, now I need to rotate this secret. And that could be for any secret, right? You know, a cert, an API key, what have you. And today, what I wanted to demo for everybody is specifically, I have a K8s cluster, and I have stipulations around that K8s cluster to keep it healthy. And if it doesn't meet those stipulations, I want to send a Slack notification to the SRE team to let them know that, hey, you need to go and make sure that this becomes healthy again. And I'll go ahead and jump into the demo right now. So let me share. All right, so as of right now, you should be seeing my port. Right now we have a workload overview. So you see my deployment status. Everything is healthy as of right now, and I have about 4 workloads inside this port. And so if I go to my builder, we can kind of double click on what's being done here. So right now I've got a pull request to a service, and this service is tied to my GitHub. And up here, we'll have the actual Kubernetes cluster itself. It's tied to a workload, which is where Kubernetes is getting its data from, or port's getting its data from Kubernetes. And then we have a specific namespace associated with that, as well as a cluster. So if I click on workload here, we can see some of the properties that I have associated with this workload. And these are the properties that I defined for this Kubernetes cluster. And the one that we're concerned about right now is the health property. So if I go into the health property, we can see a little bit about what's going on here. So my title is health. The title can be anything you want it to be. I put it as health. The more important thing is the identifier. This is how we set up our automation as to the identifier of this property. What are the parameters around that identifier? And you know, if that stipulation isn't met, what are the options for that parameter? So in this case, I have an option of healthy and unhealthy, and I'll drill into exactly how that is done. Right here, go back to my catalog, and I go to my workloads. You see I've got some workloads, but we're going to focus on this awesome service right here. And we see right now that it's healthy. It's running, it's great, it's wonderful. And now I look at the stipulations that I want. So wanted replicas should always be above 0. You know, if we have 0 replicas, that means it's not running. That means it's an unhealthy service. And then we're going to have to go in and do something about that. Now, traditionally, you know, if a service becomes unhealthy, you know, a developer might be working on top of that Kubernetes workload, building an application. The service becomes unhealthy. That application crashes. They've got to go send a ticket to the SRE team to support. Then they send it to the SRE team. The SRE team assigns an engineer to it. It's a very tedious process in getting this remediated. And that's kind of the goal of what automations is that we want to take away these tedious processes and allow Port to do the heavy lifting for you. So if I go into my builder again, we can see the automation that I set up. So there's this new tab right here. We always had data model, data sources. Now we've got automations right here. So I click on my automations. I have one, which is the service of health is changed. If I click into that, I can see the JSON behind what this automation is doing. So on the top right here is just the identifier for this specific automation. What's more important to us is the condition and the invocation method for this. So the condition is type, we're using JQ to kind of filter out the property that we want. And the expression is properties is healthy, which is that identifier I showed earlier around the health of the workload, is equal to unhealthy. So if this happens, then we're going to have to send a message to Slack. And how we do that is through what we call the invocation method. So in this case, I'm using GitHub workflows. And it's important to note here that your workflow could be anything. It could be Azure DevOps. It could be a Jenkins pipeline. It could be GitHub. In this case, I'm doing a GitHub workflow. So as long as there's a webhook and an API, Port will play with that in the automation sector. So in this case, my type, and then I have my organization name and my repo name, and then I have my workflow here as well. And then the workflow here is going to focus on the entity identifier. So in this case, the entity identifier is healthy. So that's what we're looking at. That's what's the triggering point for this specific automation. And I can go ahead and show you the GitHub workflow that I have right here as well. So I've got a job and I also have my inputs, but these inputs are as variables. In this GitHub, I have as a secret my Slack webhook URL, as well as my port credentials to get in. And then you see the specific jobs that I have right here. And you can see for this example, you can use Teams or you can use Slack. In this case, I'm using Slack and I'm grabbing the secret, which is my Slack webhook URL. And then I'm running this curl that says go and says, this has become unhealthy. This input service name, which is my service, my Kubernetes service, has become unhealthy. So let's go ahead and see this in action. Go ahead and share this guy. All right, so right now we should be looking at my VS Code. You should see a simple deployment of Kubernetes. It's just an Nginx deployment. And then on here, on my specs, I have replicas is equal to 3. So that's why my service was healthy. That's why my Kubernetes cluster was healthy in terms of port and in terms of what I defined as that property. Now, if I change that, let's go ahead and change it to 0. Save. And then we run a kubectl apply on this, we should be seeing some changes in port as well. Then let's go back to the catalog and see if some stuff. Yep. So look, we've got an unhealthy service now. And if I go into my workloads, I go to my awesome service deployment, it'll say unhealthy now because I don't have the number of wanted replicas I want. And I should have gotten a Slack notification. So we'll go over to Slack and see how that works. I paused my notifications because I didn't want it to join to people to mess around and in this webinar. But okay, look at that. I've got at this specific timestamp, it's told me that my service has become unhealthy. So drilling down into this a little bit, as to why this is important, right? You know, if I am an SRE and I want to keep my MTTR of my cluster intact, if I have to do that manually, let's say an SRE, it's 3 a.m. for them, and the developer, it's 9 a.m. for him. And the developer is developing on top of this his application, which is running on Kubernetes. And then all of a sudden, the replica set goes out. And they have to go and submit a support ticket. And that SRE is asleep in bed at 3 a.m. Well, wouldn't it be nice if we could send a notification to that SRE directly and say, we know you are assigned to this specific cluster. Can you come help and troubleshoot it? And it's important to note here, I use this example of Slack, but in terms of how you want to get that notification, it could be PagerDuty, it could be Microsoft Teams, it could be anywhere where there's a webhook that we can attach to port for you to send that notification over. So with that, I'll jump back over to the slides.
You need an automation for that.
Yeah, I know, right? Okay. And something important to note too, you saw that I had the JSON there, right? And I manipulated JSON and I put it in. What we have coming in the future is we're going to have a UI. And if you look at this UI, it's very much the same workflow that I was showing in those small little diagrams, right? There's a trigger point, and then there's an action that happens from that trigger point. So we're trying to make this as simple as possible for you to actually put in inputs in the trigger point in our friendly UI. You know, at Port, we like to keep things no code, keep it as simple as possible. And then once you create that trigger, you can create that action. And in this case, we're using GitHub workflows as well. Like I said, it could be any type of workflow you want. We're very pluggable in that sense. As long as there's a webhook, there's an API, we can manipulate it. And also, you can still use JQ and still use JSON if you want to get specific. This is just us trying to help you out and make your life a little bit easier. But Jenny, if you want to say anything else on that.
Yeah, just that it's coming in the upcoming weeks. Actually, we didn't want to release it without the UI, but so many customers reached out to us and they wanted already to use the automations that we released it with the JSON, knowing that you can handle JSON, and we will release the UI in the upcoming weeks. So stay tuned.
Cool. All right.
Okay, another great feature that we've delivered is a flexible scorecard. In the past, like up until a month ago, you had 4 levels for scorecards, right? You had basic, bronze, silver, and gold. And the names, you know, were fixed, and also the colors. What we've done is that today you can have as many levels as you want for your scorecards. You can call them whatever you want. You can call them like from A to F or whatever. And you can decide that, for example, for your security scorecard, you want to have a scale from 1 to 5. And for your production readiness scorecard, you want to have a scale from 1 to 10. So really, like we made a scorecard much more flexible. Also the colors, you can choose to have different colors for different scorecards. And naming conventions, you can call it like a bronze level, a silver gold, or good, fair, whatever. So it was also quite requested, and we delivered that in the last release.
Yeah, I can go ahead and show as well, just kind of side by side what the JSON look between, you know, a regular scorecard and what we find is customizable. So I'll go ahead and show that. This. And then let me jump to my data sources here. Go ahead. Get to self-service home. Builder. Share. Summary. There we go. Wrong port. Sorry about that, everyone. Let me go ahead and get to the right one. I want you all to see this. So it's important to see the difference between the two so that you all can understand why we built it, right? There we go. Cards. All right. So my production readiness scorecard, you can see I've got my colors here as bronze, silver, and gold. And I've got my identifier. And then I've got the properties here as is not empty for bronze. And then I've got another identifier. So these are all different things of like, okay, my properties for this are defined as Python, JavaScript, React, Go. I've got the same colors that are always given as generic. And I've also got the same tier level. Now, that's what we had before. Now, if I look at engineering quality and I see what we have now, I've got different colors that I can put in, and I've got different titles for it: poor, fair, good. It doesn't have to be bronze, silver, gold anymore. You can customize it to your team's needs, because every organization is going to have their own way of tiering an application or tiering quality. And it's important for us to have that customizability offered to you all so that you can do this yourself and still be pluggable, but then have your own flavor of how to do things. Cool. So I'll go back to the community session slideshow.
Guys, if you have questions, we are monitoring the chat. Don't hesitate to ask them. And if you have, we are really interested to listen if you have any ideas for automations, or you are going, how you are going to use automations in your ecosystem and environment. So just drop us a line. We're really curious about it.
Absolutely. Moving on. So we've added line graphs to increase engineering insights and visibility. And the whole point of this, right? You could look at it and say, okay, it's a line graph, but you're analyzing trends. Think about the personas that are going into your report and understanding what this data means. Now, if you look at the productivity dashboard and I see my weekly deployment frequency, I can see where I'm deploying the most, what times of the day I'm deploying the most, what times of the week, what times of the month. This helps gain insights as to your deployment history across the year. And it's very easy to visualize this and understand, okay, at these points in the year, I have peak deployments and my weekly average build time, as you can see, dips at this point and then kind of like integers out a little bit. And then the same thing with incident management and production readiness. What we're trying to build here is just a way for us to analyze trends over time, for us to be able to understand when we need to have peak velocity and when we don't need to have peak velocity. So you can think of this as the persona of like an engineering manager or a manager that has to understand the overall deployment frequency, or when you're budgeting out for deployments, when is it peak and when is it trough, things like that. Anything else you wanted to add there, Jenny?
Yeah, maybe, yeah. So as you said, like I think that it's also a good idea to add those dashboards if you want maybe to encourage the manager to come to the portal, and you want like usually engineering managers, they love to see like, engineering metrics and dashboards, and we have unlocked this ability to create this kind of software and engineering intelligence through Port with the trend line. Basically, what we had before is just, we could tell you in a very specific point in time what was the deployment frequency, for example. And we understood that it didn't tell a very compelling story. And today with trend, like we can also understand where we stand, if we are progressing toward our goals, and we are able to tell a much more compelling stories to managers. This is one point. And another point I think that is quite important is that using engineering metrics, you can start to showcase the ROI of your portal and trying to understand if the user stories that you put together move the needle. It's one thing. But another is like by monitoring the metrics, you can come and say, oh, I don't know, PR review time is very long. Maybe we can create a user story to nudge a PR reviewer, and then you can use the metrics to scope your next user stories. So we are unlocking here like it just sounds, oh, we deliver trend lines, but it's actually it unlocks a lot of new abilities, and this is really cool.
Yeah, well said.
We have a question here. With the engineering insights and visibility, is Port planning to expand more in the engineering metric space, competing with products as Swarmia, expanding on that? Could Port be a replacement for Swarmia? So for the moment, the scope is really, yes, to go on engineering metrics. I think Swarmia are also able to do some analysis on the sprints and how much we delivered and the value stream management and this kind of stuff. It's not on the scope for the moment, but we are looking into it. And if you are interested in it, upvote, in the feature request, because this is something that we are really looking into it and trying to understand if our customers will be interested in having all of this into Port. What kind of metrics are you interested in, Simon? Just for us to understand.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I would echo everything that you just said. I think, with Port being as pluggable as it is, we want to be able to add not just engineering metrics, but all types of metrics for our workloads, right? That's how Port was created. But in terms of gaining insights and things like that, that is absolutely what Jenny said. We should absolutely be looking into that, putting that in as a feature request. When we get a lot of upvotes, we'll push that on product a little bit more to see if that's a great thing. But really around this, it's plugging in the insights that we want via our API. So your company's metrics, your company's insights, whether that be engineering insights, it can be anything you want. But yeah, to your point, we will bring that up to product. That's a great question. All right, so we've added see, we got another question before I jump in. I'm asking because we're using Swarmia and ops level, and if we migrate to port, we can eliminate the 2 vendors and it would be great, especially given that port integration is linear. Yeah, that's a fair point. And that's a really, really good thing for us to bring up to our product team. If you can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone with port, it'd be wonderful for us to have that as an option.
And there is a good chance that we are already able to bring the data that you're using today in Swarmia into port. Just if you can elaborate even on private chat or here live on the kind of metric that you are interested to get, we can answer if today we are supporting that with port or not.
Yep, absolutely. So moving forward, the data mapping playground, we're pretty excited about this as well. In terms of whenever we had to map data to a data source, right? You would add in a specific resource to your data source. So in the case of let's say GitHub, right? And I wanted to add in a resource like pull request or merge request. What I would do is go into my mapping of GitHub and add that resource in. And we'd had to do that before and integrate it and then hope to see that, okay, did this work correctly? Did my mapping work correctly? Do I have the right resource that was plugged into port? Now what we have in the data mapping playground is we can do testing of this before we actually deploy. And this is important because you don't want to change the configuration of your data source before you've tested what you're changing and understand exactly what's going to be created. So I actually have a small little demo on that too that we can see. So in this case, I'm looking at my Azure DevOps resource here. And what's really nice is that we give you examples. Oh, gotcha. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, good now.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Jenny. So as you can see here, we've got test examples as well. So in this case, I'm using Azure DevOps, and what I'm trying to map to my data source is project. And so our test example for project is right here. This is what we should be able to see. So we're going to test our mapping data across this project right here. So if I go to test mapping, I can see, okay, so if I were to add this mapping to my data source, which in this case is a project for Azure DevOps, I should be able to get this identifier, this blueprint, this title, and the properties are right here as defined. So before I'm even adding any mapping, I already know what I'm doing to my data source. In the past, you'd have to add the mapping and then hope that the data source would integrate it as you want. Now you can kind of gain some insight into actually what is going on with your data source. And then you can also go over here, and this is a simple idea, but you can go here and then maybe do like split. And let's see, you can test that mapping. And I split my cookie cutter name up. You can do some JQ toggling now within the mapping here. What we had to do in the past to be able to kind of grab any insights or anything that we needed was go to something like JQ Play, plug in our mapping, and then from there be able to grab the insights that we need. We're trying to bring that to you here in one area of port so that you don't have to use different tools. You can get what you need to get done as in your port portal right here. So very excited about data mapping. Discard changes. I'm gonna go back here. I'll get the slideshow. And then next slide is, let me make sure I'm sharing again still. Sometimes it just moves back. Control the payload of self-service actions. This is actually a very, very cool feature in the sense whenever we were setting up our self-service actions, we did it under the assumption that in our workflow, let's say it's in GitHub workflow, it was configured for port itself. But we have existing workflows that aren't configured for port. Every company will have them. Everybody uses GitOps or GitHub workflows or Azure DevOps workflows or Jenkins pipelines, things that already are existing. How do we make them integrate and work with port? So whenever you use any type of method to go and grab a self-service action, you have to fill in a certain amount of data, and that data gets sent over via port to whichever webhook you've specified. And so in this case, the example that I'm using is GitHub workflows. So I put in specific parameters as to what I need in port, specific variables that I need for port to work with this specific integration. And then I assume that in GitHub workflows that all of that is configured for port. That's not the case for a lot of things. We want to be able to use our existing workflows that we have for self-service. So control the payload, the idea behind it is, if you see down here, we can actually define variables within port to be used in a non-traditional workflow that wasn't necessarily built for port, but now you can control those variables in that payload that you're sending over to that workflow to be able to define and say, this is how I want it to toggle and work with port. So in the past, what you had to do was you'd go into those workflows and then you'd have to change the variables up to match what port would want, and then it would work. Now we don't want you to have to do that. We want you to be able to just control that payload and let it go to where you need it to go, the destination, and then have it work seamlessly. And by doing this, we're saving a lot of time, and because there could be hundreds of GitHub workflow files that you have to go and refactor for them to work for port. Whereas we would rather you just input the variables here and put the payload specifications here, send it over, and then work seamlessly with port. And we have some IAC enhancements as well. Like I said, I'm from HashiCorp, so the Terraform data sources. This is actually a very cool feature. So now with the search API through Terraform, you can actually search and find specific items within port. Very, very cool feature. And then we've got the integration configurations as well. So all your organizational integrations that you have, you can manage it in one central location, which is port itself. So it's a way of just taking away integration sprawl and putting it in one central location, because we all get that, right? Integration sprawl is real. And then the actions resource, you could read here, is update our actions resource to include customizing the action payload and adding filters on day 2 operations. So now with port actions, we can have, there's a little bit more customization. So the action payload can be customized, and then you can add a little bit more filtering for day 2 actions. So if you're using port actions, I encourage you to go check that out. And then now we're adding blueprint permissions as well. So we've had RBAC across a port before, but now with blueprints, now we're going to have permissions extended to blueprints as well. And then you get to skip the catalog page creation when you're adding a new blueprint. Just a faster way to get to a blueprint. We've got some new integrations on the Ocean side of the house. We got AWS, GCP, and Datadog. With AWS, there was an integration before, but now we've just enhanced it to the point where you can use Ocean as an exporter or the AWS API, and then be able to create that integration so that you can have AWS as a data source within port. And then the GCP integration, I would say the operate at the organization level rather than project level is what we really want to highlight here. Before, whenever we wanted to do that Ocean integration with GCP, we would have to do it per project. So every single project you had in GCP, you'd have to create an integration, and that can get tedious and very hard to maintain and control. So we've moved it up to the organization level. So now you just have to create that integration on the organization, and then you're able to work with GCP resources inside port. And then Datadog is a very, very well-known tool. We had a lot of customers ask us to create this integration, and we responded and said, absolutely, we'll create that Datadog integration. Cool. And then the bonus, we have a new API reference guide. I encourage all of you to check this out. I can go ahead and click on it here too, and we can get to it, but let me switch over. We can look at it. Cool. So our reference guide, it's in our port documentation now. It tells you how to generate an API token, and then, or you can use that token in the browser. And we also can give you our regions as well. We have it in Europe and the United States. There's different actions and entities right here, the rate limiting. Please take some time to look through it. I think it'd be worth your time. Yeah, it's something that I've seen as a standard for a lot of industry, tools and hardware and software, that we have an API reference. So we're super happy to see that. Awesome. On our next episode, we have flexible users and teams.
We still see the new API reference guide. We don't see the.
Thank you. Yeah, I got you. Perfect. So in our next episode, we have flexible users and teams. And so this is really, really, really cool feature that we have, where you can actually add your users and teams to a blueprint. And then your blueprint has properties attached to that blueprint as well. So when you have a user or you have a team, you can add properties to that user and that team. So if I have a Swift engineer, or if I have a database engineer, I can put that property as, this is the database engineer, this is a Swift engineer, or I can make that team have specific properties and attach that to a blueprint. This is powerful because now we can parse our teams up and actually see who is the right person I need to talk to, or that is working on this specific part of my infrastructure or my application code. It's something that we've heard from our customers as well, and we think it's a great feature to mess around with and use. So I encourage you, whenever we get that out, to check out that API reference. And then, long awaited, we have the Ocean SaaS as well. Previously, when we had the Ocean integration, you would probably have to put it on like a K8s cluster on premise and then manage that exporter through there. What we're doing with Ocean SaaS is we're trying to take away you having to manage any of Port's exporters or data sources off of in your on-premise infrastructure, right? We want you to be able to bring that over in the SaaS, not have to worry about the exporter sitting in your own hardware. Where is it sitting, right? Is it sitting here in this region, or is it sitting on-premise? And then the last but not least is mapping file content to the catalog. So this is something that we've heard as well from customers. We're still working on it. I don't know, Jenny, if you have a timeline on this one, but I think
it's supposed to be on the next release.
Next release, right? That's what I think. But yeah, all of these should be on the next release. But anything you wanted to add on this? I'll let you speak.
Yeah, not just for flexible users and teams. It just, like as Anush said, this is the ability to have users and teams as a blueprint, meaning that they are going to be part of the graph. Just think of how powerful it is to be able to ingest your users and teams from Okta, and then your users and teams from GitHub, and then I think it's gonna be your single source of truth for managing your users and their permissions, and it's going to bring a lot of power. And it's also quite requested a lot, so we are super excited to provide it. And we have more super exciting things under the hood, but you will have to come to the next community session to hear about it.
Awesome. And as always, we have resources here. Our roadmap is public. We let people see that in our GitHub, in our port release notes. Please take a look at them. We are always looking for feedback from our community. So if you see something on the roadmap that you like, upvote it. If you want to comment on it, please comment. We're always looking to see what our customers and our community wants from us. So with that, I think that's it.
Another last slide. Yeah. We are having Portal Talks tomorrow and after tomorrow. It's going to be a 2-day event where we are going to talk about everything portals. We're having an amazing lineup of speakers. Zohar, our CEO, is going to give a talk there, but also Victor Farsik. He's going to talk about developer portal should be dumb, which I think is going to be very interesting. Chris Westerhold about developer surveys and how to scope your portal, portal as product, so many different super interesting topics. If you haven't registered, look for Portal Talks on Google, and you can register for tomorrow. So we're looking forward to see you there.
Absolutely.
If you have any questions, we can dedicate the last minute of the session to answer additional questions. We'll wait a little bit for your questions.
Definitely check out the Portal Talks. There's a lot of really good speakers, and it's going to be a great event. There's going to be a lot of great minds together thinking about platform and Portal, platform as a service. I think it's a great event that we're putting together.
Okay, and if there are not other questions, we'll wrap it up. We'll send you the recording as well as the presentation as usual, and hoping to see you tomorrow on Portal Talks and also next month on our next community session. Thank you, Anuj.
Thank you all.
Bye.